Alrighty, good afternoon everyone, or good morning if you are joining us in another time zone, and welcome to today's webinar session. We're joined by the wonderful team at Kidspoint today, joining Plan Tracker, and today we're talking about the transition back to school. So this has been a hot topic and I know we're getting a lot of questions. Just while we wait for everyone to join us live for the session, if you are joining us live, we'll just give everyone a few minutes to log in, but I thought we might throw across and get to know some of our presenters today. So Elisa, we might actually start with you if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks Mel. Hi everybody, thanks for joining us. I hope you're as excited as we are. Excited might not be the word about kids returning to school. We're certainly very keen to see that happen in our household. I'm the founder and managing director of Plan Tracker, and we're a plan manager based in New South Wales, servicing the whole of Australia. So that's pretty much us. Over to Sarah.
Thanks, Elisa. So I'm Sarah. I'm part of the community engagement team here at Plan Tracker, and certainly this conversation been having with parents all around Australia about how to best support their children, whether they're transitioning out of school, back into school, whatever kind of routines that are going on. So it's something that we talk about constantly in our community, and it's also something that I'm living as well because I have two beautiful boys on the spectrum, aged 10 and 11. And so we're discussing that and sort of moving through those steps right now in our house of transition back to school.
Thanks, Sarah. And Liani, we'd love to hear from you next.
Hello, I'm Liani. I'm an occupational therapist. I work at Kidspoint. And yes, I've been working with a lot of families over this time period, first transitioning to being at home and now transitioning back to school, and also living that journey with my own three kids, aged 11 to 15.
Wonderful. And Meg, lucky last.
I'm also excited to be here today, and I am a speech pathologist from Kidspoint. Also, as Liani mentioned, we have been supporting families transitioning into homeschooling options and now navigating this tricky time coming back to school. And again, I have two littlies who are transitioning back to school as well. So
fantastic.
Nice
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. My name is Mel. If you haven't met me before, I'm usually on these webinars with Elisa or with any of our lovely webinar partners. And today, we're not going to waste too much time at the start here. I do just have a little bit of housekeeping for you all before we jump straight into a lot of content. We've got a lot of value to add for you. Now, you might have noticed we are missing a member of our team here for this webinar presentation, which was our psychology professional, who unfortunately, for personal reasons, couldn't be joining us for this session. But all of the wonderful panelists that we have here today have so much value to add and share, both professional and lived experience. So we're really excited to jump right in there for you. Now, if you haven't joined us live before, or you have, this is just a quick refresher. If you want to chat with us, we've got a chat box and a Q&A. So if you've got questions as you go along and you want to ask us something, you can jump into those chat box and pop them in there. We have the lovely Justine from Plan Tracker who'll be assisting to answer some of those questions. We may park some of your questions to answer live on air. And if there's anything super specific, we may actually come back to you after today's session. We do also have just a quick disclaimer. Obviously, because of the topic we're talking about today, all of the content and links provided in this session are for informational purposes only, and they're not intended to be a substitute for any professional medical advice, and they can't be relied upon and shouldn't be relied upon as health or personal advice. So always seek guidance from your doctor and any other qualified health professionals in your team regarding any health or medical questions that you may have. And please do not disregard the advice from a medical professional or delay seeking it because of something you have read or heard in this session, whether you're watching us live or watching the replay. That's all the boring stuff out of the way. So I think we might jump in if everyone's ready to go. I'm just going to pop our slides up on the screen for you all. So just bear with me for one moment while I grab that. Alrighty, and Elisa, we're actually going to start with you today. So just while I'm grabbing these slides for everyone.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about what's happening in our world, Mel.
That'd be great.
So I have three lovely children, 17, 15, and 13. My 17-year-old daughter is autistic, and my 15-year-old son is also autistic. Everybody seems to be going okay. Mr. X, my 15-year-old, he uses Proloquo to go to communicate with. So he's been pretty anxious about the whole going back to school thing, and doing lots of this. which is his sign for, what the heck if I get COVID and die if I go to school, Mum? So I'm really keen on today's session to hear some good ideas from everybody else on the panel and get some thoughts on what might help. He has gone today for his second day back. So hopefully we won't wear it all too much this afternoon when he gets back.
Fantastic. And I know we do have some topics that we're going to talk about specifically for that. So hopefully we can add some value for you there, Elisa, and for everyone who's watching in regards to that kind of what to expect at the end of day one or day two in your case. Now, let's jump right on in. So first up, I thought we'd like to talk about anxiety, and that being social anxiety at the moment, particularly with going back to school, whether they're going back full-time, part-time, a day a week, whatever it might be, and also the what if. So Sarah, I thought I might invite you next just to share. I know you've got two lovely boys who love to ask a lot of questions, particularly from one more so than the other. What sort of what if questions are you getting at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Mel. You know him well, don't you? You know Zeke well enough to know that questions are a big part of our day at the moment. But in fact, you know, with Zeke asking a lot of questions has really reminded us about what is really important in supporting him. So despite so many things about Zeke's life and his daily experience changing, but what hasn't changed are the core fundamental ways in which we support him throughout daily life. So the three things that are really important to him that I just want to touch on is important conversations with his important people, surrounded by his important possessions. And so those important conversations, it's kind of like a mental rehearsal, shall we say. He does like to ask about, will everyone be wearing the same clothes? And what about if someone gets sick? And how do we measure the distance we're supposed to? And will I be able to still touch books at the library? And all these types of things. So first and foremost, allowing plenty of time for those conversations to take place. And they need to happen across a variety of people, like his parents, you know, mum and dad, plenty of time at home one-on-one, but also with friends and family members, his support worker, therapy team, whoever, just having access to those people to have those conversations helps him prepare. And then also remembering that sometimes we can become complacent and think, oh, well, he's always got books, he's always got his comics, and they're there every day. But right now, they're really important. They're the things that really anchor him, that assist him to basically process the changes that are going on, to be able to move forward even though everything is not set in stone, is really important. So, you know, we have lots of new copies of the Tintin comics at the moment. They're really super important for him to carry around. We've revisited some of the program that we did in the growth mindset. I'm not sure if you could see that, the Big Life Journal. We're revisiting some of his favourite chapters in that one. And we don't ever go far, we don't do much without having our little, you know, tear off to-do list, which is just our core things to keep us on track in daily life. So those three things have really been our focus. And I think so far, we're doing pretty well.
Pardon me.
Fantastic. And bless you to Meg. Sorry about that,
Sorry,
everyone.
apologies.
That's all good. So, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing, and Elisa as well. Liani, I'd love to gauge your perspective in terms of how do we handle as a parent these what if questions? Is there a right way or a wrong way, or is it kind of individually just we have to look at our own kids and their own needs?
I think, and for me, it's very important to involve children. I think, you know, in my therapy too, that's always my focus, is to have kids find their own solutions. And what Sarah was saying about working through that together and having the child identify what it is that they need is very important. And with a lot of, quite a few of the kids that I work with have already returned to school over the last couple of weeks. And it hasn't been without glitches, but we've used those moments and those things that aren't going well at school. Why can't I climb the monkey bars? Why can't I play in the sandbox? Those are my go-to activities. That's what you've taught me to use to regulate at school. And those options are no longer available for me. But instead, using, sitting down with kids, parents and kids, to plan their day, How do you see walking through the day? What's going to make your day better? What are some other options in the playground for you? Is there anything you can take to school? Like Sarah was saying about Zeke, maybe he takes his Tintin book to school because, you know, no longer they can climb on the playground. So having those familiar things really offsets the anxiety that has, you know, is existing and that we've created partly around our current situation.
Fantastic.
We've modeled a lot of anxieties for our kids because we've been so uncertain about what is happening and when things are going to change for better and for us to be safe. So it's for us to expect our kids to equally be flexible is usually one of the hardest things for them, and not give them the space and the time to talk to us about what is impacting them for the transition. So we, for example, might be worried about the logistics when they might be caught up on the pieces of play equipment, or how do I interact with my friends, or which teacher am I going to have today? So really listening to their key concern, and then, like Leonie said, working with them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Meg. And look, I think that comes back to a conversation that Elisa and I definitely have had in many a webinar session, which it comes down to communication. And it is a key piece, and it doesn't just have to be with your NDIS team, it is also with your child, especially as you're in this transition period, whether they've already transitioned back to school in the last few weeks, or you're looking at doing that this week or next week or over the coming months. To definitely keeping that communication stream open and getting the kids involved. Now, I'd love to hear from Leonie and Meg. Actually, we're going to throw straight back to you. What can I expect as a parent over the coming weeks? So if my child hasn't gone back or has only just gone back, what sort of things should I be setting myself up for in terms of my own expectations as a parent as to how my child may or may not cope with this transition back into the school place?
You definitely can expect them to be resistant, to be apprehensive. Just like we see after a holiday or a break at school, when kids go back that first day of term, it's always stressful. That transition back is always a new experience, even though it is something that they've done before. And I want to come back to talking about the familiar things, because clinging to some familiar things is really what helps you to stay grounded during that time, whether that be a toy, an item, a routine, a strategy, something that they used to engage in and that they can still use. Or it can even be something new, but it's something that's comforting to them. So just having that go-to activity. And, you know, there's been, like I said, we removed our children from school. We made a big hype about COVID. Society in general, we've created anxiety. There's fear of something unknown, something you can't see. We've modeled it to our children. We've stayed home. We've pulled them from school. We've pulled them from society. Now we're putting them back. There's going to be chaos at school because schools are figuring out how to do this thing safely as well. Yes, there is a lot of things feeding into their anxiety, activating that part of their brain that puts you on high alert or in that red zone, or whatever regulation system you're using your family to refer to. But if you're already in that zone, it's really hard not to be on the defense. So we can expect to see our kids melt down, feel angry, be frightened, fuss over things that we don't think are important, get stuck on things that should be a non-issue, struggle to transition basic routine. So, you know, getting from home to school, or getting out of your pajamas at this point, I would expect would be a difficult thing to do. Yeah. Yes, I struggled a bit to get my teenagers out of their fluffy gowns to get back to school. Yeah, so I think we can expect to see some difficulty, but also take heart in the fact that they are going back to something that they already have a familiar repertoire with. So once they're there, and I've seen this over the last couple of weeks, a lot of the kids have done well once they're at school. And then, of course, they come home in the afternoon and have a meltdown.
Yeah.
But that's also something that you should expect and you should set yourself up for and plan for.
And what I've noticed too, and for parents to be mindful of, just communication in general. So your child might be a brilliant communicator or has been previously, but don't expect too much from them, especially post-school and even just before school. So with anxiety comes reduced communication skills. It's not the fact that they don't have the skills, it's just they can't use it functionally at the moment. So quizzing them and being an interviewer after school and certainly before school, you know, how do you feel? What do you think about this? Or how did your day go and who did you play with? Now's not the time for that. Now's the time for open comments and just really following your child's lead. If they really want to talk to you about some things, excellent, great, use that and follow them. But if they need some time and space to be on their own, to process their thoughts and then come and talk to you, that's also okay.
Fantastic. And Sarah and Elisa, I know both of you have got some kids back in the school environment this week. And I think for Elisa, you had your ones go back last week. How are you finding the transition so far at the moment? Has there been this level of resistance to going? All right, just going to unmute
There we
you
go.
Elisa.
I'm unmuted.
Sorry.
See? Oh, Mel. I always have too much to say. Look, it's been interesting. My girls who seem to have coped a lot better, but my son Xander definitely has been challenging around routine. You know, we've had a lot of days in pajamas, and trying to change that early. I know I know one of the strategies is to try and build up kind of that standard routine you want to head for ahead of time. But there are days I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to win the pajama war today. That's okay. For us, it's been simple things like things that really are hard. We've had to let slide. Having a shower, that transition into and out of showers is never great. So I've gone, well, you don't smell too bad. You'll be fine. Just put the uniform on and we'll be right. So definitely compromising on a few things so that we win the overall goal, which is to get him to school, out of the car, into the building. So yeah, that's been, and I guess for us it's that routine stuff is tricky, you know, because it's like you can have the routine there and then all of a sudden they're just not doing anything, just not moving. And yeah, he's quite a tall 15-year-old, so when he's not moving. So
Fantastic. And Sarah, I'd love to hear from you if I can unmute you. We'll be doing well. There we go, Sarah.
There we go.
Sorry about that. I'd love to hear from you. How did you go? I know you've got both of your boys at school today, actually, while we're doing this session,
Yes.
which is very exciting for you, I'm sure. How have you gone with this transition period so far?
Look, absolutely. I agree with everything that everyone else said. Definitely dropping the expectations, remembering what the really important things are, and also being open and paying attention, I guess, and being open and a little bit curious about how things, because we might have a particular mindset about how things are going to happen when they arrive home, or what we need to know from them, or what we need to understand in order to support them. But being open just to slow things down and being curious and taking notice of where they're at, then we can sort of be open to responding more appropriately, I think. So I tend to have a busy schedule, so my sole focus has been just allowing to free myself up and free the children up, definitely, for that after school routine, and not having the same expectations as well as of myself too. What time am I going to get dinner on the table? What's going to be involved in preparation and those sorts of things, and being a bit more flexible with those.
Fantastic. And I think it's really important, and we're going to touch on that a little bit later in terms of setting expectations for yourself as a parent, because you are involved in this transition, even though you're not the child going into the school environment. It is definitely important. Meg, I wanted to ask you next, in terms of realistic expectations, things like academia and assessment tasks and what have you, is it realistic right now to be expecting kids to excel or participate in those in full? And I'm just going to unmute you. I'm very sorry.
Zoom must have done an upgrade, I think.
Perfect. The short answer, no. If now is not the time to be jumping into complex assessments and academic tasks, and if you're able to postpone those, and most schools have been really flexible. Again, the teachers are coming back and they're starting a new routine. They've had to adapt to teaching online, something that many teachers have never done. So they're now transitioning their students back. So with them, again, I can't speak on behalf of the education department, but I know that their expectations of the academic content has been revised. So just assuring your children that, you know, they're not expected to come straight back into class, and they won't be, you know, straight into assessments. And also with healthcare professionals, if perhaps your child is going through a really difficult time and you are coming up for a review, again, that open line of communication. Do you need an assessment done at this time, or is that something that you could postpone to a little bit later? Again, just reading where your child is at, like Sarah said, and then adjusting, but, you know, just lower their expectations around the school work side.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Meg. And Liani, I just wanted to check with you. I know a lot of these activities aren't actually open for the majority of us, but where they are, what about extracurricular activities? Is that something we should be trying to encourage our kids to do during this time?
You know, I would agree with Meg. We want to keep the focus on gradual, I would say, gradually transitioning our children back to school. And I think the capacity for each family or each child would be different. And so this is very important for families to co-regulate with each other, to know what the family as a whole can take on. If mum already has a busy schedule and kids are slowly transitioning back to school, I know I'm not ready for extracurricular activities because I've got too much on my plate. Or maybe,
well
or
said,
maybe,
Liani.
yes, my kids are not going back to sports because I'm too busy. And also, maybe the children need to come back into it gradually. Or maybe you have a shift as a family altogether. Maybe you're enjoying doing recreation together as opposed to more organized sports now, and you want to maintain that routine with each other. And it makes me come back to the what Elissa had said about routines. And not all families are very routine based. Some people have looser structure in their houses, and especially when both parents work or when the kids are very busy, the routine tends to be a little bit looser. And you have to do what works for your family. And there's different ways of, our kids do need routine. They need to have basically clear predictability, need to know when something starts, when it ends, what's going to happen this afternoon, what is our rough plan for the week, you know, where am I going this afternoon? But we don't have to have all these schedules with the whiteboard with all the millions of pictures. That can be very overwhelming at this time because it can make you anxious looking at how much stuff you have going on as a family. Whereas you could simply say, when we're finished with lunch, we are going for a walk. So the child knows what's coming next. It's not too rigid, and it really works for me. For my schedule.
Liani, on my whiteboard it says today is Thursday, because I've really struggled with what day it is, and honestly the number of times I've gotten halfway through the day before I realize it's actually a different day. It's like, oh, again with the day.
And you know, Elissa, at this point, your whiteboard is just orientating you to time. That's the only visual cue you need today.
Exactly. Exactly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all of that very valuable information, Liani, and to Meg before that. Elisa, I wanted to invite you to start us on our next topic. I know we hear from our audience a lot, so a lot of the Plan Tracker family, as we like to call it, telling us all about their new normal routines. And I think it's really important for us just to kind of stress that we're not returning back to our normal routine. We're kind of establishing a new normal. Elisa, I'd love to hear from you. What's the new normal going on in your household?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's been an odd new normal because 3 kids, 2 girls are at one school and my son's at a different school. So they've been quite different experiences. So he's been home for a lot longer than the girls have. One of the things I've found that has helped us in terms of our new normal is when there's a lot of change and information going on, that it's tricky to try and sometimes we think we've said it, even the person's in the room, but it just hasn't landed. So although my whiteboard is definitely telling me it's Thursday today, thank goodness, it's also making sure that our new normal, where it is different, we're starting to just write it out in point form. Like, today you're home. Today you can do some exercise online with your exercise physiologist or whatever those things might be. So it's still a weird normal. Come Monday, of course, all Department of Ed kids or kids at government schools are back at school. So that's going to, again, be I'm not sure I'm looking forward to the getting lunches made every day. It might be me struggling with the new normal here more so than the kids, I think, at this point.
Yep.
Just to check, Elisa, that's for New South Wales schools or nationally?
New South Wales, sorry, that is
Fantastic.
New South Wales. I'm not sure what's happening in all of the other states. So you would need to check with your own school for that one.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And Sarah, I'd also love to hear from you. Have you done any of these kind of, there's a few points on the slide here, like recon missions in terms of getting prepared as to what that morning routine might look like and doing a drive-by at the school?
Yeah, we've done a few things. As you know, photos and videos and visual diaries and journaling is really important in our household. It always has been. So we've really stuck to those types of things. We've created Pictello stories, which is a story, social story like app, which is super simple to use. We've also broken up in our Google Photos. And it automatically downloads all the pictures that we take on from day to day from our mobile phones and things. And then what I do is I put them into shared folders. And so I can share out folders to the teachers and to various people so they know sort of what's been happening in our world before they arrive. But it's also a great way, as I said, for Ezekiel particularly, is that mental rehearsal of like it's reviewing things and it's helping prepare. Remember, this is what it looks like, this is where we're going, and these are the types of memories that you have of those types of activities or those locations. So that's a really key, important part. We've just continued on doing that type of thing. And I want to be honest for a minute, if that's okay. It's not all roses, it's been tough. I would actually say that the COVID experience for Ezekiel, my 11-year-old, has actually uncovered some phenomenal growth and development, and we've got some exciting new things going on, which is just so surprising and so fantastic, and we're celebrating those. With my youngest son, Spencer, there's been a lot of reasons that this isolation period has kind of been like the perfect storm, if you know what I mean. All these things have lined up for us. It's been incredibly challenging. And so we still go through these things of setting up social stories and using the language that's important to him and really making sure that his devices for communication and all are all appropriate and all lined up for him. And then we just stick at it and stay the course. Yep.
Fantastic, Sarah. Thank you so much. And I know that takes a lot of vulnerability to be open like that and to say it's not all roses. So I really appreciate the honesty there, because it's more realistic for more families and for us as parents to know that we're not alone if things don't go to plan, and just to keep at it with that routine. Meg, I'd love to hear from you around the sort of language that we as a parent might like to consider using with our kids during this time to help with the transition.
Yeah, and you're right, Sarah, it doesn't go to plan. And I think with that, and the language ties together, is to have a plan in place in case of. So certainly as parents or key caregivers, if you can have a chat and have a plan about the types of the language that you're going to use beforehand. So with that, some examples are not if you'd like to go to school tomorrow, it's when we go to school tomorrow. So the framing of our statements and questions is really key. As soon as we give certainly our majority of our population, if we give them a yes or no response, I guarantee I know what the response is going to be before I ask the question. And why wouldn't they? They've been at home and safe, and many of our kids have been thriving learning at home, but it's getting them ready. So when you go to school tomorrow, we're going to walk in this gate, and being really practical and objective. We're going to do this. Not setting them up with examples that you're not concrete and sure of. So you're best just to omit that and leave it out. If you don't know where they're going to go or what they're going to be doing or who they're going to be seeing, best to leave it out, because then you create heightened expectations and that we just can't meet. So if you can keep the language simple and positive. So, and that might be even with your therapist, you're still doing sessions online. It's you get to talk to Meg or Liani today, not you have to sit down and talk to Meg and Liani today. Just the framing of what we say. Really
I love that shift in framing, and I think that's really important in terms of establishing these social stories. And thank you so much, Meg. That really helps to build upon what Sarah was saying there in terms of, as a parent, our role is helping our children to establish their own social story, but we have to be that kind of foundation block for them just as we get going. Now, I know, Elisa, you've mentioned your visual aid is all about what day of the week it is. Liani, I'd love to invite you to share on these visual aids. I know you've got a couple actually, I think, sitting on the wall behind you there. Is a countdown to school calendar helpful for kids getting back into the school environment, or are there any other aids that you'd suggest?
Some children like to count down. For other children, that may create increased anxiety. So it's better for them to just do one day at a time. You may want to start doing a little bit of your routine, though, beforehand, if you know that your child likes to work through things ahead of time. So it's a very personal choice. Visuals, like I said, sometimes we can have too many visuals, and that can create clutter for the child as well. Keeping it simple generally, more imagery. For instance, what's behind me is the zones of regulation. And I think that's what a lot of people use. That's what a lot of the schools use. So that's why I have it. And having conversations with children around what happens in each of those zones, where they anticipate going to school, and talking about those emotions. Even just thinking about school, which zone does that place you in? Maybe sending up some alarm bells, or immediately you could be going into the red. And so you could use visuals to have those conversations with your children and anticipating where they're going. Other visuals. Some kids, I suppose, do need more explicit visuals, as a definite routine for where things are going. Other children, what works better is the first then approach. So you may just have one, we're doing this now, and then we're going to do that. And that's usually my first go-to for parents, or especially in heightened stress situations. It's better to just pare it down to two visuals. Did you have something to comment about that, Meg?
Just the first and then. But also,
yes,
we're finding our kids being heightened and coming home.
I think we might have just lost Meg there.
Well, one, they're fatigued, but they've got a lot of choice. Oh, sorry.
No, you're back. You're all good.
Okay, great. This is something Liani and I have found, is that our kiddos are having a lot of choice fatigue. And I don't know if many people are familiar with that. I can see a lot of nodding heads. There's too much choice. And I know I can't cope at the end of the day when I am drained. I cannot think about what I'm going to cook for dinner. So for our kiddos to come home and then you say, well, what snack would you like? What are we going to watch on TV? what's something that we're going to do this afternoon it's just a bit too much for them. So perhaps using visuals there, you know, we've got two choices, you just let me know which one you would like, or I'm going to show you these objects or these foods, which snack would you like?
Can you relate, mums? If somebody said to you,
seriously.
this is what you're cooking tonight, then, you know, I'd spend hours making it.
Many businesses have profited off that.
It's the hardest bit, right? The making, no problem. The deciding, oh my goodness. Yeah.
It's so true. I use first and then on myself. I go first, I'll do this hard job and then I can make a coffee. So it's really, I think it's logical to, and I try and sometimes model that with Zeke and show him that I'm using it on myself, because I think it sort of, you know, puts us on an even playing field then.
Yeah. And I found, like, just on a really practical level, you know, my son, he hates making choices. He hates making choices about anything on a good day. So on a tricky day, there's just no way. So I actually just make the choice for him some of the time. So, like, for example, the minute he walks in from school, there's going to be food right there at his place in front of him. No choice required. His only choice is, do I eat one massive bite or do I chew on the way down? That'll be it.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And just conscious of time, everyone, we're going to move on to our next topic, which is sensory regulation. But I've popped a couple of links in the chat box and we'll include them with the replay. We've just got some links from Kidspoint, who were kind enough to share these with us, just in regards to an example of how to write a social script and some more information from Carol Gray and Sulaki. So I'll pop those up in the chat box for everyone, and we'll jump into our next topic of sensory regulation. Now, methods for coping with the unknown. I know a lot of us will come in and out of if this, then that, which, Sarah, I love that yours was a coffee, because I know for a lot of parents, I think the reward of a coffee is pretty strong reward and motivation for doing something. But Liani, I wanted to invite you just to comment on how we're involving our kids in this process, and Meg will also get you to build upon this. In terms of sensory regulation, I know we talked about it a little bit earlier at the start. You've mentioned things like if I can't use the sandbox or the monkey bars at school, and understanding why I can't use those. I think Liani's just dropped off there. So Meg, we'll throw to you next. Not to put you on the spot, do you have any tips for involving our kids in those conversations? So say if their go-to is that sandbox or the monkey bars, how do we involve them in the conversation around why they can or cannot use that during this time?
Yeah, and there's been, again, we've sort of heightened our kids around the safety, and we need to be careful around COVID. And we've done a really great job of keeping them safe and showing them the danger. But then sorry, Liani has joined me.
That's okay.
So I might just take my headphones out. Will that work?
We'll give it a go and I'll let you know.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Do you just want to do an audio?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can they hear us?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yep.
Well, so we're going through a bit of a transition here at Kidspoint. We're building, and we have a power outage in the main building. So here I am.
Oh, now that wasn't planned for.
No.
So we're just talking about what do we do in terms of preparing our kids if their regulating activity is not an option. So
Yes. And that is why, as an OT, I spend a lot of time doing sensory profiles and questioning people about their sensory behaviors and preferences. And people also, I suppose, seek out OT so that they can get solutions and strategies for those sensory issues. But I think generally my approach to it is more that you have to identify what your window of tolerance is for stimuli from the outside, whatever sensory information, because essentially everything we experience is sensory information, correct? And we have to all learn where is that comfort zone for us? Where's that window of tolerance? And if somebody else gives me strategies to cope with my sensory preferences, I'm never going to learn where the outside boundary of that window sits for me. It's very important to involve children, and also it's actually important for some of those strategies not to be available at times, so that you can learn to have alternate plans, and you can learn how to regulate within that that comfortable place by finding things ad hoc, so to speak. I hope that makes sense.
And encouraging all the families to talk to the teachers where possible. I know it's hard to communicate, we're trying to maintain social distancing, but we've got fantastic apps and emails, and just brainstorming to let them know, you know what, we're sensory seeking by spinning or moving our body at the moment. Just if we can try and redirect them at school into an activity or a space that they could do that. And then hopefully our teachers can support our children to find an appropriate activity to do at school.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that requires a lot of space. So it doesn't have to be a sensory activity per se. Anything that focuses your mind takes also your focus off whatever is bothering you in the environment. It may be a sound in the classroom, and I think often that's a big trigger for our kids. If you then focus your mind on something that you enjoy doing, like building a puzzle or coloring a picture or a specific task in the classroom that makes you feel important and valued, then that has far more value than going and bouncing, for instance. And so I'd like to encourage people to think outside that sensory framework and finding something that helps them regulate. It could be your cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And on that point, I thought we might transition across to talking about parental wellbeing, particularly when we talk about cups of coffee, which for a lot of us is our own regulation method. Definitely for anyone in the Plan Tracker office, there's usually a queue at the coffee machine. So checking in with yourself is definitely a big thing. And Sarah, I just wanted to throw to you next. Have you found a way to kind of hit pause amongst all of this?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for asking, Mel, because this is something that I'm really, really passionate about. I think it's so important because it's a journey that I'm going through, and I hear it expressed so many times when mums and dads reach out to me and talk to me about their personal situation. So there are so many things that as parents, while we've got this enormous job, you know, it's so vast in a variety of tasks of raising these human beings, but there's so little that we actually have control over. And so the one thing that we can truly, you know, I guess, control and that has an enormous impact is our own well-being, is filling up our own cup and regulating ourselves. And so taking a moment, and I do that through rituals, and many people do, they mark that pause or that transition between one phase of life to another or one routine to another by having some sort of ritual. So sometimes it's an activity such as taking a really long walk on the beach. Maybe that hasn't occurred, you know, having that time on your own, which hasn't occurred for many parents in a long time. Perhaps it's a conversation with a really trusted family member or friend and just getting to unpack some of the stuff that's been going on in life. There's lots of different ways in which we can create a ritual that allows us to take stock. And that's a time not only to acknowledge the challenges and the hardships that we're facing and the unknowns that we're about to move into, but it's also acknowledging and giving ourselves credit for what an amazing job we're doing.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And yeah, look, I think definitely taking that moment to pause and take stock and give yourself some credit that you are doing an amazing job raising these human beings, whether they're little guys or they're in their teenage phase and they potentially don't want anything to do with you on some days. Now, Elisa, I know you have some great tips for us around taking the stress out of the morning, which definitely includes having both the school shoes packed and ready. Do you just want to go through kind of your day one list of taking that stress out for mum or dad, for the parents who are going to do that morning routine on getting back into school? What's your advice for taking the stress out of the morning?
Yeah, well, look, first of all, I'd like to say my experience has been that my kids are a lot calmer after I've had a cup of coffee. So that seems to work quite well in our household. I am it's so true. As anybody who knows me will know, I am a list lover. So our life does run a little bit on lists, and And my kids run really well on run sheets. So A4 page, half the side of the page. Okay, here, get out of bed, come and have breakfast, take medication if that's needed, go and get dressed, pack your bag, like really simple, brush your teeth, that type of thing, tick the box. That always works really well for us. But for me, I think it's, when coming back into this season, even this morning, which is, day 2 for my son going to school, and I did cheat a little bit because I knew the morning was going to be a bit rough this morning, or just, can't or won't. Today's probably going to be the can't day. So I decided that he and I would go to Nana and Pa's for dinner last night, and we'd buy takeaway, and we would buy enough so that he could take his takeaway lunch to school today. So for me, that was like, we know what's happening for lunch. That's good for me. It's good for him. And it's kind of a special treat because he's a bit of an Indian lover. So, so just making sure you've actually got, from a practical point of view, you've found the school bag. There's no dead bananas in the bottom. That's never good at 7:30 in the morning, You've found both shoes, and they're the ones that belong to that kid, because they all look the same. And if you've got kids of similar ages, they're all kind of the same size until one goes with the wrong pair, and then the next one can't wear their pair. And, it's just some really simple little things can take a bit of stress out. Knowing where you're going to drop them off, that might have changed. There might be new rules, adults might not be allowed to walk into the school at the moment. Being aware of that, prepping for that, making sure they're aware of it, making sure you've written it down, because we said it, but that doesn't mean it went in. Those are my kind of tips for the morning. And then, of course, coffee once the drop-off has happened.
I think that's your second coffee for the morning.
It's been that kind of day.
I love that. And Liani and Meg, I'd love to invite you. Do you have any tips for staying calm as a parent? I know Elisa obviously has a nice plan out there, and I think that definitely helps us to take that stress out of the morning. But what if we're also feeling anxious about our kids going back to school? How can we stay calm as a parent?
Are we anxious about our children going to school? Yes.
Yes. I just think if you can share and validate that with someone else who's going through a similar experience, if you can reach out to another parent, they might have a child with additional needs, or they might not. I think most parents across the board are pretty anxious at the moment. So if you can share that experience with someone else or a family member, just really communicating and not feeling isolated, and allowing yourself to go through this as we did at the start of quarantine and self-isolation, letting yourself feel all of these feelings and talking to your team and friends and social networks.
Mm-hmm. And I like to do some simple co-regulation exercises with families, little fun, playful activities where you have to work on something together, whether tug of war or bouncing a ball on a blanket, and those are activities that you can do before school, before you start your morning routine, just to bring you back in sync and back into a physical rhythm with each other. And it usually sets the stage for working together so much better. So that's just a little practical tip.
I absolutely love that, and the fact that it's something easy to do there, Liani, in the morning. And Meg, coming back to that communication piece, as always, communication is definitely key, and especially for yourself. So reaching out to fellow parents, obviously talking to your partner or family members and friends, definitely having that conversation, knowing that you're not alone. And I know we've had a few comments in the chat box. Thank you everyone who is popping comments in there, just regarding it not being roses all the time. It isn't for all of us. So what I'd like to jump into next is this communication piece that we're talking about. And I get the slide to go along. So what sort of tips do you have for kind of keeping that good communication going? I know we often talk about keeping your child's team informed. And for this session specifically, we're talking about potentially your child's NDIS team. So whether that's your plan manager, support coordinator, your therapy team as well. Do you guys want to, Kidspoint, would you like to comment on that? Do you have any tips for keeping those communication, and who should be our kind of key contacts?
Yeah, I know certainly for my clients, it's been really tricky. Lots of families want to keep me up to date with every day and every moment. but taking pause and summarising the week as a whole, perhaps, or the fortnight. So not, again, lowering our expectations to that this might not be, we might not be feeling this, you know, uneasiness tomorrow or the next day or the next day. So my tips would be just, if your preferred method of communicating with your therapist is to call or to email, yes, keep them updated, but perhaps, you know, check in with them, you know, once a week if you're not already regularly doing that. That would be my preferred method. But also, schools are pretty great. Many of them have an app or some form of digital way you can chat to your teacher. So working out with your child's teacher how they best want to communicate with you. And again, being mindful, they're quite busy during the day, so the times in which we try and contact our child's teacher. But really,
but do stay in touch. So I know when I meet new children or new families, I immediately feel better once I have email communication regularly. I'm connected with.
Oh, I think we've just lost the audio feed there from Kidspoint. We'll just give you guys a minute to jump back in with us. Sarah, I'm going to cross over to you.
Messages back and forth, then yeah, that'll be great. Yeah, then it works. Everything works so much better. But sometimes we do want to share too much, and I mean, we all have to be careful of that. If you consider even teachers, you know, they've got 24 plus kids in their classroom, and I think a guideline for communicating would be what works, what doesn't work, and suggestions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Leonie and Meg. We did have a little bit of an audio issue there, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box. And I do just want to kind of reiterate something in terms of your expectations around your school and particularly your child's teacher. The child's teacher is also going through this pandemic with all of us, so they may have their own social anxieties as the school environment transitions from online back into face-to-face learning. So just being respectful that we are literally all in this together, and we're all going to have our little roadblocks where we may feel a little anxious or unsure. So definitely, Leonie, you touched on it there, making sure that the time and expectation around communication with the teacher is realistic. They are often quite busy during the day, even more so at the moment as they're managing a lot of kids who may have those anxieties or uncertainties as we re-enter into the classroom face-to-face learning environments. Now, I wanted to touch on, Sarah, I might invite you next. In terms of emotions, I know that Zeke, our lovely little chatterbox, always loves to talk and ask questions. How are you going around wording with emotions in terms of using, as we've got examples here, in terms of are you sad or are you worried? Are you getting more into that descriptive side as well?
Absolutely. Well, as you know, Mel, we do a lot of work around breathing. We use a lot of breathing exercises. We use a lot of yoga games and poses and lots of those sorts of things. And what I will just say very briefly about the sensory regulation part is that we've really seen a sort of a step back where we're sort of expecting or seeing a lot less self-regulation, and we've moved back into co-regulation, which, by the way, is fantastic for me because I need a partner to regulate with too. So he and I are a really great team. We're doing our breath work, we're doing our exercises that we have, and we've really sort of made a couple of different routines that we can choose from depending on how much time and space and opportunity that we have. During that time, we find that things can come up, and we do find, oh, I've got a stomach ache, or there's something jabbing me in the side, you know, or we talk about tight legs, and we talk about heads that feel fuzzy, and so we explore that type of conversation. That's what really, really works for him. With Spencer, obviously, he can't express those things to me, so it's really just, this is where communication is so key. So I hope that one of the legacies of of COVID is that the Seesaw apps and those types of tools, those online tools of information sharing, become standard, and that we become really proficient at sharing across environments, particularly for our kiddos who can't express themselves in that way. So we sort of have a little bit of a scoring system, you know, where Spencer's teachers and his support staff, they sort of know the types of things to report back, and I report the same things back, and sometimes we use it with a scaling system on how to grade it, and things like that, instead of expressive words. So I guess it's different for every child. Yeah.
Yeah, can I jump in there? I have we had a really great example where sometimes we think, oh, you know, I thought, oh, Xander must be really anxious. We were going for our first haircut a couple of weeks ago. Just happened to be that the whole family was booked in for haircuts at the same time. It's about 1.5 blocks from home. So I said, right, we can walk. This is good. Oh, well, behavior went out the window. Just, you know, we started to fall apart. And here I am thinking, oh, this is anxious about going for a walk. He's anxious about getting his hair cut, about going into somebody's house. Da, da, da. I'm making all these assumptions, right? Because he uses text and other methods to communicate, I just had missed the fact that he'd already sent me a text 20 minutes before, which said, I have not had socks for 2 weeks, Mother James, you know, and I'm like, socks? This is the whole thing. We're falling apart is because you have not got a pair of socks. So, you know, we can make these assumptions that it's about how we're reading anxiety around the world. But in fact, coming back to Mel's point right up front, communication, you know, it's so key, where if we can check in and get that right understanding of what actually is the issue, and we can get some communication happening. And, you know, but he was too under pressure by the stress of not having a pair of socks that he couldn't even bring and show me the phone, you know. So it was just, he's like, I've communicated this 20 minutes ago and you have missed the memo, literally. So yeah, kind of that going back to less expectation around communication, and not assuming that it's about the sort of anxieties we might think it is.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, Elisa, and thank you so much for sharing. I know that, as you rightly said there, sometimes we're so in our own kind of bubble that we're assuming what the anxiety may be about, and it may be completely opposite, or we might have just missed a piece of communication. So definitely keeping an eye out for that. Megan, Liani, I'd love to invite you next to talk about navigating the tough times. So I know a topic that we get asked a lot about is, what do I do if my child is having a meltdown? Liani, you touched on it earlier that we may actually like to expect this as we first transition back into that school environment. And I'm just going to unmute you guys there. Sorry about that. There we go.
The meltdown. Yes, it is the feared word. And I think a lot of parents live in fear of the meltdown. We tend to plan our lives around it to avoid it. And I always invite parents to befriend the meltdown. Make that the thing that happens that actually gives you an opportunity to teach your child how to regulate. So we are going to go through tough times, and we're going to melt down, but finding out what it is after that meltdown. I see you all shaking your heads, yes. So after the meltdown, what is it that brings you back to calm? And those are your sensory or your regulation strategies, the things that brings you back to calm, or back to the optimal, just right zone. And so that's what we want to do with our children too, is not to avoid the meltdown. We want to prevent it because it is a stressful event. But when the meltdown is there, is to ride it out. And that looks different for everybody. We can't give specific advice. That's really a situational thing. Some kids may need different strategies than others to get through whatever that meltdown looks like. But the key is to afterwards re-engage with the child, because our social connection and relationship is the foundation of regulation. And so reconnecting with that child, and then doing something that is pleasurable, that re-engages their attention and their focus and brings them back to calm. And it could be a playful sensory activity, or it could just be a playful activity Or it could actually, some kids thrive on doing work, little organizational jobs, or even schoolwork, you know. So,
Ooh, I think we've just lost your
person
audio.
learns back into that calm, then goes into your toolbox to manage.
Alrighty.
Not to talk negatively about.
We've just lost the audio
you
there.
know what's
from
happening?
Kidspoint.
It's the 3 o'clock kids are arriving home from school and all jumping onto Minecraft.
Oh, perfect, we're back.
There you go.
My big take home too would be not to communicate negatively about the meltdown post. You know, it's again about that framing. You know, I'm so proud of you. You were able to come back and we were able to do this together, and you were really out of control with your body, but then this is what you did after. Just all of that positive language around post. And I know it's really hard as parents when you're exhausted, they're having a meltdown and you're co-regulating up together, but really being mindful of the language we use after, that helps solidify and strengthen their ability to self-regulate the next time.
And talking about the experience, not right after it happened, but when you're back in the calm space, to go back and make them aware of what it felt like to be there, and how it's not a happy place. It's not a wrong place. We all get there, but it's not a happy place, and you don't want to get there too frequently. So, because the more times you enter that red zone or the meltdown zone, the more it's going to happen. So you do want to minimize it, and preventing it. We can expect with the transition back to school, you know, I'm just making it more applicable to what we're talking about today. If you know every day at 3:30 after school pickup, it happens, then you know to prepare for that, and planning and preparing after school, what is it that we need to do or not do to prevent that? What is it that my child needs to regulate after school?
Fantastic. And I think Elisa mentioned one there before for Mr. X having food ready to go when he walks in the door. And that can be as simple as it is for regulation, or you might have other strategies that work for your child and your family. So I am just conscious of time for everyone. I know we've had a lot of information in this session. Some of the other things we just want to touch on briefly, you can always reach out to your NDIS team if you are requiring additional supports during this time. So you've got a support coordinator in place. If you've got core funding available and not support coordination, it is now available under core as well. You can have a chat to the plan tracker team if you want more information on that. Reaching out to your plan manager to see what funding you have available to engage additional supports is also another great one. Or having a chat with your local area coordinator if your plan's running low on funding, whatever it might be. And Sarah, I know you're a big one for this, a big advocate for this, sorry, being ready and open to accepting help if family and friends offer. So I know a lot of us don't want to always say yes and accept that help, but now I know is definitely a time for a lot of us to say, okay, I'm going to maybe put my pride aside and I'm going to say, yes, I'd love your help if you're open to helping me. What's your experience been there, Sarah?
Yeah, I just want to touch on this point very briefly. It also ties in with the final point, which is connect with community organisations. So often, if I have the privilege of connecting with families in really difficult times, they can say to me so often, oh, but I know what I need to do, or I know what needs to happen. I've just got to make it happen. So just like we understand that our children are brilliant, amazing humans, but they can't always access all the skills that they've got, we are the same as parents. We're not always going to be on doing all the brilliant things that we've learned to do and inherently are those people. We just can't do that every day. So being ready to accept help, for me personally, it was actually, I'm a list person like Elisa. I had to brainstorm some of the things that I could farm out to people. While there was so much going on and there were so many difficult things from time to time in my life, but I had to actually put a really brief list together of like, you know what, I've got an amazing community, I've got amazing friends and family. Why am I always saying, no, it's okay, thank you so much, but it's okay? Because it's not okay. I needed help. So definitely thinking about that process, having a bit of a list prepared allowed me to then go, you know what, is it okay if you could do this? And it was actually much smoother and much less painful than I had imagined it to be, and it's a great way to reach out to your community. The other thing is about community organisations. So often we can feel, oh, that's for somebody else. That, you know, those helplines or those community organisations are for other families, for other people, but they're not. They're actually for all of us. And so reaching out, having those conversations and saying, this is a situation. What can you tell me? Is there any services? Is there any resources? And sometimes they might not be the one to help you, but they can refer you on. And that is the way you build your network. And you may not use them all at once, but you know where they are. And so you have this beautiful, nice web around you. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. And just conscious of everyone's time, we are going to wrap things up for today's session there. Elisa and Sarah from Plan Tracker, and we've also got Megan Liani, who've joined us today from Kidspoint. Thank you all so much for all of the valuable information you have provided to everyone. The replay recording will be sent around tomorrow, and you will also have captioning available in that replay, as well as the contact details for both Kidspoint and Plan Tracker. If you've got any questions beyond what we've already been answering in the chat box, thank you to everyone who's asked them as we've gone along. We thank you all so much for joining us live or watching the replay session. And until next time, we hope you all have a great week and hopefully a successful transition back to the school environment for your kids. And always remember, success looks different for everyone. So whatever that means for you, that's a great success for you and your family. So thank you so much for all joining us today. And we hope to see you on another session sometime soon. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.